Hello, day drinkers. Good to see you on this Thursday. If you are new here, welcome to the interview series. I pick a book, the author picks a drink, and we talk about both. My favorite things. Tonight's author is Lexi Ryan, who I know a lot of you know as a New York Times bestselling romance author, but she has just released an amazing YA fantasy called These Hollow Vows. And we've got a lot to talk about tonight. I've got this dashboard. I do all of this stuff through StreamYard. So if you'd like to leave a comment, please do. But I've got to click on this thing real quick. It was just Lexi telling me hi. So I'm going to read the back cover copy because my mom likes that. And frankly, I think maybe some people who are a fan of an author's romance, they're only romance readers and they don't always make the leap into the next thing. Let me tell you what a satisfying romance novel this book is as well. So I'm going to read the back cover copy. Go get this book if you are on the fence about picking up Lexi's YA fantasy. So These Hollow Vows. And also, I'm sorry that I don't have a copy of the book to show you. Maybe Lexi will, but this cover is gorgeous. It's so gorgeous. It's rich. It's sexy. It's romance and YA, which we'll talk about. Okay. From New York Times bestselling author Lexi Ryan, Cruel Prince meets a court of thorns and roses in this sexy, action-packed fantasy about a girl who is caught between two treacherous fairy courts and their dangerously seductive princes. Bree hates the Fae and refuses to have anything to do with them, even if it means starving on the street. But when her sister is sold to the sadistic king of the unseelie court to pay a debt, she'll do whatever it takes to get her back, including making a deal with the king himself to steal 3 magical relics from the Seelie court. Gaining unfettered access to the Seelie court is easier said than done. Bree's only choice is to pose as a potential bride for Prince Ronan, and she soon finds herself falling for him. Unwilling to let her heart distract her, she accepts help from a band of unseelie misfits with their own secret agenda. As Bree spends time with their mysterious leader, Finn, she struggles to resist his seductive charm. Caught between 2 dangerous courts, Bree must decide who to trust with her loyalty and with her heart. Sounds good, right? So let's bring in Lexi. Hey, Lexi.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to do this.
Well, I'm excited to talk to you about it. It's funny. I was in touch with you a little bit as I was reading it, but I was just away at this cottage and I was able to really dig into it. And I had so many gasp moments. And then reading the back cover copy, you don't even talk about, anyway. There's so many. So the first question I want to ask you is, is YA fantasy always been a love of yours? Why is this recent? Is this a new idea? Is it one that's been kicking around for a while? How did this happen?
So this is kind of a newish obsession, new being 2018, because it's traditional, so things move kind of slow. My first published novels were actually paranormal romance. They're not available now because they're just not the quality that I require. But I wrote a series about this. It was I pitched it as super sexy Charlie's Angels with superpowers, right? So I really have always enjoyed magic and magical powers. And I've always been kind of, I don't know, 1 foot into the woo-woo. My father's ex-wife, not my mom, but the woman he married after, was a trans medium. So she talked to dead people for a living.
Oh my God.
When I wrote paranormal, I was always is it paranormal or is it normal? Because my life had so much. And he owned a spiritualist Christian church that he was a reverend at. So my life had a lot of the weird woo-woo in it. And I say weird with love and respect. But I was in high school through all this. My friends would come because the church was in my dad's basement. My friends would come we were in band and they'd come to church sessions to play their band instruments with me. So we'd have live music at the church meetings. And they would always kind of give me the side eye because most of them were Catholic.
You're like, listen, don't you get judgy, Catholic.
I just think it was like that. Pretty sure we were told not to involve ourselves with this stuff. But, and my brothers played D&D when I was growing up. So like I would sit on the stairs and they'd be in the basement and I'd like peek out while they all sat on the pool table and fought these mythical monsters. And, so it's just like always been like part of me. And then in 2018, I like went through some stuff. The world was kind of feeling like too heavy and too awful, both like in a macro and a micro way. And I picked up A Court of Thorns and Roses that I'd had on my Kindle and on Audible, both forever, and just never actually read. And I mean, I had a reader friend who betas for Sarah send her, because she at the time didn't take fan mail. So I had her send her my fan mail because I was like, I need her to understand how much these books saved me. Like they were exactly what I needed. And then I did the deep dive, like all the YA fantasy I could get my hands on, all the urban fantasy. I read the Fever series like 3 times. I don't know if you've read that. It's got Celia and Unseelie Faye in it too. Yeah. And all of Holly Black's backlist, especially her Faye stuff. Holly Black is like so clever. Like the way she writes Faye, because fairies are supposed to be like super, super clever and they get you because they're so clever. But it's hard to do that because you as the author, but she's so good at it. If you haven't read The Cruel Prince, I'm going to advertise everyone else's book. If you haven't read The Cruel Prince series, I think it's the Folk of the Air series is what it's called. Mm-hmm. The way she deals with super clever fae, and those fae can't lie. It was just like, I was obsessed. So I was obsessed with fairies. I was obsessed with writing some magic. I was obsessed with big bad. I wanted the opportunity to like physically kill the big bad, like I had some anger and I had some frustration, and I was like, man, I put my contemporary romance heroines and heroes up against some pretty nasty stuff, but they never get to like kill the big bad.
Kill the big bad guy, yes.
So I'm like, okay, if someone gets a monster in the woods, I want there to be something satisfying, like it was just what I needed. And so at first I started playing around and writing a little here, writing a little there. One of the first scenes I wrote was a shower scene that you may or may not remember.
I know I remember.
And I was like, maybe I'll just throw it up on Wattpad and we'll see if people want to read it. I was like maybe a couple thousand words in before I write my agent with one line. And I think it was something like, a girl makes a deal with a dangerous fairy king to get her sister back or something like that. I was like, do you think anybody would be interested in this from a romance author? And he was like, yes.
Wow.
I wrote the proposal. We sold it on proposal. And then, as New York does, things moved very slowly from there.
Yeah. But that is like, it's one of those things that we hear a lot of authors talk about, like, you've got to like take the time and do the sell line, the log line, the line that's going to sell your book. And every once in a while it happens so like organically, and here's this great line. And sometimes I'm like, well, this is stupid. Who even wants to do this? But that's the power. That's the power. You had all the conflict. You had the whole world in that line. You sold that book with that line.
I sold it to him, and then I did a little bit more to sell it to HOH. But no, it was awesome, and it was awesome to be able to do something a little different. I've written over 30 romance titles, and I love romance, and will write romance forever.
This is very romantic.
Yes, it is. My brother kept seeing I have 4 brothers, and one of them kept seeing snippets on it. And every time he'd see snippets from it, he'd be like, this seems very, I thought you were writing fantasy. This seems more like, he kept saying, it seems more like True Blood. And I'm not sure what he thinks that comparison means. But I said, I think you mean it seems like a kissing book. And that's because it is. And I will always write kissing books. I love kissing books. So
in writing your first YA fantasy, how tricky was the rhythm or the conventions versus what we have like just sort of soaked in as romance authors about writing romance? Like,
I think the
what
hardest thing is when I went into it, because I went into it, I mean, I went into writing romance as a fangirl of romance, but I've been reading romance since I was 12 years old, you know, and I went into
there's a
this.
lot of power. You soak
Yeah,
in a lot of the conventions through
right.
reading, for sure.
You do. And I've been reading fantasy for a long time, but not as, you know, romance is like my regular diet, you know? So this was like, fantasy was like the, you know, special treat now and then. But then I've just done this gorging myself on it. And I held every author that I read in that binge period up with such high esteem. So the hardest part for me was getting over myself, right? Like when I wrote the proposal, we sold it with like 50 pages and like a 20-page synopsis. It was long.
Whoa.
Yeah, but you know why now. You know why you read it. But when I wrote the proposal, it was this fun thing, right? So I was okay then. It was just like, ooh, I want to see if I can do this. This is fun. But then I sold and I had this proposal. I had to turn it into a book. And the hardest part was getting over myself, like not taking it too seriously, making myself remember that I was doing this because I wanted to have fun, that it sounded like this really fun, awesome story I really just wanted to write and was willing to write and just throw on the internet for free just so I could write it. And so I had to remind myself of that, but that was hard. So you know what I did?
What?
You know that trick they say to, if you're taking yourself too seriously, write in Comic Sans? I drafted this book in Comic Sans.
Isn't that nuts? And it worked.
It works. I just had to, you cannot take yourself too seriously. You know, in high school, I always said you can't take yourself too seriously if you're wearing goofy socks. Well, as a writer, you can't take yourself too seriously if you're writing in Comic Sans.
You know, it's interesting that you bring that up because I do think, I mean, I think in terms of the, 2018 and then the COVID, I mean, every writer that I know really, really struggled this year, like getting over themselves and like the writer's block and all of those things. And it's a daily, I mean, is it for you? And Lexi is, I mean, in full disclosure, Lexi is someone that I talk to, not in summer, because I've really committed to not working this summer, but like, is it a daily thing for you that you like, how big a battle is this for you? Or has it been in the last little stretch? Because I mean, I think it's such a
the COVID thing is a little different. The COVID, one of the things I realized when we like went into lockdown and the kids were home nonstop, before we went into, you know, stay home mode, I was in my car constantly running kids to gymnastics or running kids to, you know, to school, back from school, to friends' houses, to this activity and that activity. And I would have said, oh my gosh, I just don't want to be a taxi. And then that all went away. And I was like, whoo, look at all this time I have and time with my family. And that's awesome. And that was fun for like a month.
And now they're here all the time.
But suddenly I would sit down to write and I'm like, what is happening? And I realized, and I think I've realized this before, but it hit hard, just how much time we put into writing when we're away from the keyboard. And I do a lot of that when I'm in my car. And so when I'm driving and just kind of thinking and,
yeah,
you know, the kids are in the back and, you know, whatever, and just kind of my brain's going. And I took that away. And suddenly when I'm at my keyboard, nothing or very little or dribs and drabs, or I have to rewrite it even more. I'm already an incredible rewriter. I rewrite like crazy. So having to rewrite even more was, I'm like, what is going on? Like, is this depression? You know, that's happened before, you know, like it could be that. And I really analyzed it though. And I'm like, I'm not getting the non-writing writing time. And I don't think we give it enough credit. I don't think we give our brains enough credit or ourselves enough credit for the work we do that doesn't feel like work. Right. Because, I didn't accomplish anything today because I had 0 words.
Yeah, didn't 2,000 words. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I didn't accomplish anything. Well, but did you spend some time thinking about the book? Did you spend some time like sorting things out? I always say I should be able to write off my massages because that is where things come together for me. On the massage table, my brain's turned off everything around me and like just totally inward. Unfortunately, I'm afraid the IRS wouldn't agree. So
it's funny that you say that because I had 2 writing experiences this year. One was one of the best that I've ever had, and one was the absolute worst. And the best one is the book that had been percolating for like a year and a half before. Like I'd written, the synopsis and the 3 chapters, and then it just sat. It just sat, and I thought about it, and I sat. And the other one was the 3rd book in a trilogy that I was like, okay, I'll leave this thread. I'll figure this out later. And then it was time to figure it out, and I had not. And it is because I didn't have that baked in, walking around, the 10 minutes before you fall asleep at night.
Right. Yeah. So much of that. And so much for me, like when I'm reading, I'll see a character motivation and then something about my own character because they're so different or because they have a slight similarity, because I can't help but analyze as I read, and something then will click. So, but if I'm not thinking about any book, well, I can enjoy reading, but like, it's not the same experience and I don't make that progress. But yeah, I too had a book this year that I wrote that went really, Every Time I Fall came out in April. And it was the book that was like in the back of my mind the whole time I was writing the sequel to these Hollow Vows, because it was like, okay, as soon as I'm done with this, I have to like dive headfirst into writing that because I don't know if I can meet that deadline. But it was a heroine that I totally related to. She's a big girl, and being a big girl was a big part of her story. And so it just poured out of me. There are always struggles in every book. That I don't want to say like every moment was easy.
No, but when they're hard, they're hard.
But when they're hard,
and they're easy to, that's true. Like, when you're given a gift and when you're given a nightmare.
Yeah. And I think so much of it is how much time it sat in our brains. And I sometimes we sprint together. I don't know if you've been on there lately, but it's not uncommon for me to get to a point at the end of the day and be like, I've hit a snag and there's no more good I can do here. I have to just let it sit for a while. And I'm not even like actively thinking about it. I'm going to go have dinner with my family. I'm going to sit and watch some TV with my husband. I'm going to do my daughter's hair, but it's just back there. It's doing its job. The girls in the basement. Is that what Cruzy called them?
Yeah.
She called them the girls in the attic. And then someone else called them the girls in I don't know.
Yes, I think you're right. But we are off topic here. So one question that I have. So let's talk about the world building, because you are creating. So first of all, pardon my ignorance. Is the Seelie and Unseelie court? Is that Shakespeare? Like, where is that from? How is that such a common?
Its origins are in Scottish. I think Scottish before Irish, but Scottish and Irish mythology.
So it's a real, okay.
Yeah. It comes from Scottish and Irish mythology. And so do a lot of the creatures that you encounter throughout the book. I kind of decided going in that I was going to lean a little heavier on Scottish mythology, but if I found something that I thought wasn't cool, I included it either way. And then I just made my own spin on it. So I felt like there's a lot out there that leans more heavily on the Irish mythology. And I was just really wanting to maybe as a nod to my husband and his family's heritage, do a little more of the Scottish stuff. But yeah, that's where it comes from as far as I know. And anyone watching this, if you're like, no, it's actually ancient Greek, please tell me. Like, feel free to email me and be like, here's your source material. It's even earlier than that.
It is. I mean, it is something that I've seen quite a bit. So I knew that it had some sort of, context.
Well, it's so interesting. The language just has always struck me as so interesting because, as my brother said to me while I was drafting book 1, he was like, no one calls themselves anything. No one wants to be something. And so I thought, yeah, that's why that seems so strange. Like that's Unseelie. It's the Seelie and the Unseelie. And so in book 2, I kind of addressed the the etymology of the language that.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So that was a lot of fun for me. And I might be the only one who cares.
You're not.
But I think it's interesting because we don't, you don't want to think of yourself in terms of what you're not.
Yeah.
Think of yourself in terms of what you are. So.
We do have a question here. So this, I think, is going back to our conversation about when you're having a tough time working and writing. So do you ever set it aside and start something brand new? Start a whole new plot? Same characters, new plot?
It's not uncommon for a book to become different than what I thought it was going to be. For instance, I just finished writing a book that I thought was going to be like this dirty office romp, and it became very heavy and deep in
political satire.
I should have known it was going to go that way. But I didn't change because I'm not really a plotter. I'm a character-driven author. And so I didn't change the plot so much as the plot grew and developed more layers. And that happened when I was writing these Hollow Vows. It happened when I was writing the sequel. That's kind of common, that I think, oh, it's this. And it turns out that this is only this like small thread of what I'm writing. And it's really way more meaningful when you combine it with everything else.
And is that something that you often do in rewrites, or does that come to you as you're drafting?
Both. I have to do a lot of rewrites because I write out of order. I write things as I know them. So that was even what I did when I had to write the synopsis, because I was like, oh, synopsis, and I'm not a plotter. How am I going to do this? So I was like, okay, I'm going to write it the same way I write a book, but instead of writing full scenes out of order, I'm just going to write the pieces that I know out of order. I'm just whenever, okay, I want this to happen. And okay, this needs to happen. Oh, what this makes more sense here. And if this, and I'm then constantly moving things around. Like someone gave me the puzzle pieces and I just have to figure out how it all goes together. So I even wrote the synopsis when I had to sell on proposal. I wrote the synopsis that way because just like I would write the book. And then of course it grew and changed a little bit as I drafted the actual book.
And of course that synopsis was garbage. And it didn't at all.
It was, like my friend Mira was like, I can't wait to see how it goes when you draft this book because maybe you're going to become a plotter.
Didn't happen. Spoiler alert, didn't happen. So so in this world, and not to give any spoilers, you have Arabelle is in the real world, and her sister is sold to they're sort of like indentured servants. Their mother and father are gone, and the daughter or the sister Jazz has been sold to the evil king of the Unseelie court, and then she has to enter into the Seelie court, this magic world. So, and once there, again, this is not a spoiler. It is a lovely little gasp-worthy moment. She realizes she has some powers.
Yeah.
Right. So she has some powers. When did you ever write yourself into a corner with this, this world building and the magic, and like, were you like, oh, well, she needs to have power? Like, how did it? Because I mean, as a person who, and now finding out that you don't plot, I mean, that's a lot to juggle. I mean, you have magic, you have love triangle, you have the world building, you have the idea that it's a duology, so that it does end on a cliffhanger. It's a lot to juggle. So how often did you write yourself into a corner?
Probably less in book 1 than I did in book 2, because I did have to write that synopsis, which probably, I mean, in the synopsis, you get stopped and you're like, oh, wait. But there was one that came back. There's a mirror in the story that she has to find. And I don't want to give too much away, but my editor asked me a question about how she was using this mirror. And I was like, oh, crap. And so I get on the phone with her and I'm like, you're right. We need to address this. Can you help? And she was like, oh, I thought this was going to be one of those writer things where I just point out the problem and you already know how to fix it. I was like, no.
It's one of those editor things where you point out a problem and you see a solution.
Yeah. It's one of those things that, like, once I figured it out, it was not a big deal. I was able to figure it out and fix it. It's a magical mirror. And the way she was using it was kind of made you feel like, is she making good decisions here? And I had to make it more believable in terms of her decisions and in terms of what people were telling her. But I wanted people also had to be telling her things that in the way that they would in line with their own motivations. Because one fun thing about writing this book is it is entirely in Bree's point of view. Yeah. So, and she's an outsider. She is from the human realm and she's come to fairy and she has all of these fairy tales that she's been told growing up, but she's kind of hates them. Huh?
That they're bad fairy tales. Like they're not like fairy.
They're bad. And she's like never really paid that much attention because she just doesn't like them and doesn't care about their stories. So, and doesn't believe it anyway. Like, how much of what I've been told can I actually trust? Which is fair. So everyone has their own motivation. And as the writer, you know their motivations. You might not want to reveal them through what they say and do, but you have to always make sure that the character's actions are true to their motivations. And it was one of those things that I had to fix that I mean, it really threw me on my heels for a minute. I was like, oh.
One of the things that I actually really liked about her was how clear she was. And I wondered if it's, I mean, you're character driven author, but this is a plot heavy book. So her character, I mean, it's just like a bit like an arrow. And there's this great scene where she kind of gets drugged one night and makes a bit of a fool of herself. And the next morning, as I'm reading it, and like the thing that I'm like the scene that I think is going to happen as a romance reader, as a romance writer, you know, this kind of like this embarrassing, cringing sort of thing. And she's just like, oh, fuck you guys. Like, yes, I was a fool. Like it's just this like, and you're like, yeah, no, that's totally her. That's completely
her. And it's all, you know, that's what's awesome about being like a character driven author is because it's all based on her past, right? Like she has spent her entire life working her ass off so that she and her sister have a place to live and so that they can make these payments to her aunt.
Lexi is a thunderstorm rolling through Indiana. Oh, she's back.
Am I back?
Yeah, you were frozen for a second.
Oh, so good. I'm sorry.
Nope.
Hopefully my Wi-Fi will cooperate. But she's just always been laser focused even before we meet her. And so she thinks that her purpose is to protect her sister. So the second her sister is sold, she has...
yeah, it's all about that.
She's failed and it has to be about that. And there's no cost that's too high.
So again, this is a duology. And you've done cliffhanger romances before.
I have. I love cliffhangers.
Oh yes. Ooh. Look at this cover. And it's hardbound. I read it on my Kindle. I want one of those.
I need to send you one. I'm sorry, I didn't have any print copies early.
I'll send you one. Let me open it up and show us the font, the print. Oh, now she's frozen again.
So, you guys, I want to show you the map.
Oh,
look at this map. I keep talking about my brothers. Woo. Sorry, I'm in mirror here.
Oh, that's awesome. That is awesome. I mean, you have
my brother Aaron drew that map for me. And when I contacted my editor and I said, hey, my brother is an artist and I'd like him to do the cartography. Bless her heart. She was like, I mean, she doesn't know. So she was like, oh, well, we don't know if it would match the branding of the book. So we hate to promise anything. And then I thought, oh my gosh, of course. They're probably like, this girl thinks her brother can draw the map for the book.
Right. He'll be sending it in crayon.
So I said, listen, I'm going to go ahead and commission him to do this. And if you guys decide not to use it in the book, then I'll just use it on swag. It's fine. You can choose. So it gave me what I want. Gave them like an out to be like, oh, it just doesn't match the branding. Because of course I know my brother. I've been commissioning him to do artwork for me for years for this or that. You know, he's drawn pictures of my dogs. He drew pictures of me and my husband. Like, he drew a picture from our first summer we were together, so I know how talented he is, but she doesn't know that. And of course, when I sent it, they were like, oh, wow. I was like, right.
That's right. I wasn't lying. So how was it balancing the love triangle? Do you like love triangles? I mean, it's not a full, like it's not a full-fledged love triangle, just for those of you who might hate it. Go ahead.
Love triangles. I hear from readers all the time, just FYI, I hate love triangles, but I loved this book regarding many, many books of mine. This one, lots of others, because I write them a lot. It's a tough balance because the hardest part of writing a love triangle is if your protagonist seems wishy-washy or like, oh, I just can't decide, then it's obnoxious. So that's why it's so important for her to have a goal that isn't necessarily, it's not about the love. The goal might involve the love interest, but it's not about falling in love. The goal isn't about falling in love, because otherwise it can be real obnoxious to be like, okay, just make a choice. Like, oh my gosh. So I have just always loved them. I think it might go back to insecure high school girl who wanted to feel wanted. Know, like, if I'm going to dig into my psyche, like what's better than being wanted by one amazing guy? What if you're wanted by two amazing guys? And I think I oversimplify it kind of as a nudge, but because it has to be more than that. It really has to be more than that. It has to be an opportunity to show different facets of your character. It has to be an opportunity to heighten conflict in a way that's not just, who do I choose?
Right. Right.
In this instance, it gave me the much needed opportunity to explore two very different politically minded people. There's a lot of fairy politics in this book. And so by having the love triangle, I got the opportunity to kind of dig a little into these different points of view and to show, okay, these people are telling her different things, and some things line up and some things don't line up, and who can I trust, and why would,
right.
It's so hard to talk about it without spoilers. But.
Well, I mean, they're opposing courts. They're diametrically opposed people, and I one of the things that I loved about it is that because it's only through her point of view, we only know about them what she knows about them.
Yes.
So that really lends, one guy is shrouded in mystery, the other guy is an old, a bit of a friend. Anyway, I really liked it. So my last question for you is, this is billed as a YA. It's mature. It's mature. So that's just what we call it.
Yeah, they call it mature YA or upper YA. So it's billed as like 14 plus. When people contact me and they're like, I'm going to buy this for my child, I'm always like, okay, just so you know, there's a love scene in it. I would let my son turns 14 in September. If he wanted to read it, I'd totally let him read it.
Yeah, my daughter is.
He wouldn't want to read it because I wrote it. But if he did, like, I've recommended books to him that are steamier than this. Of course, the second I tell him that hey, just so you know, there's a sex scene in this book, but it's not too bad. Don't worry about it. It's not too bad. He'll be like, never mind. And I think it's like that. I don't want my mom to know that I read,
Fair.
So, but I'm very, very open with that kind of stuff. So I always just want people to know for their kids, like, if you feel like your 12-year-old is not at a point where you want them to read a pretty tame love scene, then the 14 plus YA is probably not the place to go.
That's not where you're at. Yeah.
It's funny. I sent this book in, and the first draft, my editor came back and was like, listen, we really want the Sarah J. Maas fans, so bring that romance writer sexy that you have. Like, don't be afraid. I will tone it down if you go too far.
Nice.
And I was like, okay.
You asked for it.
And then book 2, there was a part where she's like, they had me cut and cut and cut and cut. And then she was like, you're going to kill me because we've had you cut so much. But I think we need another love scene here. And she was like, I'm not sure if it's sexy enough. And I was like, gauntlet thrown. I'm on it.
Wow.
But then they pulled me back because I apparently got a little too like, wait, it's not sexy enough? You know, like, you can't say that about my books. No, like, oh, it is still YA.
It is a very strange line to walk. I mean, it is a really romantic book. It's very romantic. And the sex scenes don't feel gratuitous. They don't feel out of bounds. It isn't suddenly an adult book like you read some. And no, it's super well ordered, or super well done by you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to let you know. Just ordered it.
Oh, thank you so much.
I'm sorry your name isn't showing up for us, but you know.
Yeah, StreamYard's like that. You have to like go outside of Facebook to StreamYard and give them permission to show your name, but we can still see the questions.
So when does the second book come out?
July of 2022. I know it's forever.
What?
It's a typical traditional publishing schedule. Book 1 and 1 year later, book 2.
And so you're done with it, or you're done with edits?
Yeah, I've actually even done copy edits. All we have left is proofs. So and I approved the ARC cover copy the other day. So like it's in the pipes. So
are you excited about the cover?
I haven't seen the cover for book 2 yet. I'm very excited to see the cover. Now, for both the UK and the US edition. You guys, I'm going to show this again. And again, I'm in mirror here, so pardon my ignorance and knowing. There we go.
The two princes. See the two princes there behind her?
So the woman who did, Louise Pressler, I think is her name. Louisa Pressler, perhaps. She does lots of fantasy book cover art. They sent me this, and I was just blown away.
Yeah, I would want it framed. Like, I don't see that about a lot of
gorgeous. So I'm so excited. I'm not going to say what, but there are very dramatic and obvious changes physically to Bree between book 1 and book 2. Molly, you probably know what I'm talking about. So it's something silly, but it's like, I can't wait to see how the artist handles that. And I don't know what it's going to look like. I can't wait.
For those of you out there who have not picked up this book, if you like YA fantasy, if someone in your life likes YA fantasy, this is a really, really satisfying read. Again, it is 14 plus, but the love scenes are tamer. They're warm and exactly right. So I cannot recommend this book enough. The world building, the pace, particularly at the beginning, when she has to sneak into this world, and there's this scene where she's literally been like a thief living on the streets, and she's about to walk into this ball, and someone's like, you can't go in like this, and you get that gorgeous like YA fantasy makeover scene that's so satisfying. And like, so there's so many satisfying moments. There's a lot of like, oh, like look at what you did there. It's really fun. So I encourage everybody out there to go grab it, pick up. What's the name of the second book?
Oh, okay. I'm going to tell you. I don't know if it's officially been announced, but you can find it if you search Goodreads. So we're going to roll with it. You know how it is in traditional. It's like, I wasn't even sure they'd gone with my title until a blogger reached out to me and was like, I'm so excited to read, and named it by name. So it's called These Twisted Bonds.
Love it.
And
that fits so well.
Yes.
That fits so well.
Yeah, like if you read book 1, you understand. So I'm really excited. I wish we didn't have to wait a whole year, but it's the nature of publishing, and hopefully we'll build the fandom a little bit so that we have a bunch of people excited to grab book 2 when it comes out too.
Yeah, so go out there and grab book 1 so you can be ready for book 2. Lexi, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Molly. This was so much fun.
Yeah,
thank you everyone for your sweet comments in the sidebar. A lot of you, I don't know what your names are, but it still means the world to me to have you say nice things.
You're the best Facebook user.
Yeah. Facebook user, you're the best.
Everybody out there, get the vaccine if you haven't done it yet. Wash your hands, wear a mask. I can't believe I'm still saying that, but you're still there. Have a drink and read a book. I really appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers. We didn't even talk about